Hi everyone, this is Dr. Mike, host of the free iTunes podcast, Psychiatric Secrets Revealed with Dr. Mike. But that's not why I'm here today. This is another Saving Savvy episode, really a photography 101 episode, and we're going to talk about using macro extension tubes. So, this is our little subject here. This is a little Lego man that my son gave me many years ago for a Christmas present. So you can tell how young he was. He thought this was an awesome present to give his dad. And of course, I think it was an awesome present, so I've kept it. By the way, I think the year before he gave me a red marble, and I have that too. But he's a little guy, and so if you try to take your camera with a normal lens on it, there's going to be a minimum distance that you can actually focus to the object, and you can't get any closer. If you get closer, you just can't focus. Now, all lenses that are out there will typically focus to infinity. In other words, they all will allow you to focus off to the distance. But when it comes to bringing stuff real close, they'll have their limits. Now, there, of course, are actual lenses that are called macro lenses. They're usually extremely good optics. You can get really, really close and fill the frame up completely at a 1-to-1 ratio, but they're often very expensive. Now, obviously, if you're into macro photography, this is a big deal. You want to get one of those lenses. But if you want to just toy around with macro photography, you can use an extension tube. And what an extension tube does is it moves the lens by using an extension tube out further, and I can then bring this object closer and get a much more magnified view. So let me show you just what this is a 50mm lens. Let me show you what it looks like. Here's a picture with it, just the maximum focus or the minimum focus distance. And in this next shot, you can see how close I can get with an extension tube. So a couple things to remember. Each camera will have a little bit different setup. The nice thing about this Nikon D300S is there really is no setup. I just have to put the tube on it and play around a little bit and it works just fine. But you need to know that there are two types of extension tubes. There's this type, which is just a hollow tube, and you can actually unscrew portions and make it different lengths. The longer it is, the greater the magnification that you're going to be able to get, but you're also going to lose more light, and your depth of field will be slightly shallower. So sometimes if you don't need all of that magnification, you want to go with a little shorten your tube a little bit. But this is just a tube that offers no electrical connections. This one's actually made out of metal, and I'm sure I paid less than $10 for it. There's another type of extension tube. This one here, what brand is this? This is a reboxing. You see a million different brands, but this is XIT, trademark, XIT. Now the difference between this extension tube and the one that I showed you before is, if you look here, there's all the electrical connections, and there's actually a motor screw here. So on this type of extension tube, in theory, you should be able to maintain all of your electrical connections and just kind of mount your lens on this, and you have the camera do everything fairly automatically. With this type of tube, you have to do things manually. I will tell you, after using both of these tubes, I actually kind of prefer the manual one better, and I'll tell you why. So first thing you need to know is you need to get the right set of tubes for your camera. So if you have a Nikon camera, you get Nikon tubes. If you have a Sony camera, you get Sony tubes. And if you have a Canon camera, Canon tubes. So the mounting is correct. And to mount it on the camera is very, very simple. You just mount it the way that you would mount your lens. So you would just take it, and I can never do this very well when I'm trying, but oh, there, I did it. Okay, so now you have your extension tube on, and then you would take your lens and you would just mount that. Oops, I'm doing it wrong, of course. Like that. So now you can see it's much longer, and I'm able to bring my subject much, much closer to the tube. So this particular set of tubes that I put on have no electrical connection. It will meter properly, but I'm going to have to focus and adjust the aperture manually. So here's another important point to note. So most, at least with Nikon cameras, most of the new lenses are these G lenses. There's just like a switch or two on here, but there's no aperture control or anything. That's all done by wire. It's all done electronically. So this type of a lens would not be good for a manual setup because I wouldn't be able to adjust the aperture, and most likely it would go to the tiniest aperture, which is really going to get rid of a lot of light. So what kind of lens you want is one, I have one here, I actually have one mounted on the camera, is an older Nikon lens. So you can pick these up actually pretty inexpensively on places like eBay, and you can see here that I actually have the ability to control the aperture manually. So that's a very important function. So you want, if you're going to use a manual extension tube, you want to get a lens that you can control manually. Now, for casual use, I would recommend a lens like a 35 millimeter or a 50 millimeter lens, just because you have a little bit tiny bigger slice of depth of field with those smaller focal lengths. And again, here too, if I make my tube shorter, I won't have as much magnification, but it will adjust my depth of field a little bit. The other way that I can increase my depth of field, of course, is bringing down that aperture, but it becomes kind of hard to see what you're doing since you're doing all this manually, so you're going to probably leave your aperture at like 5.6 or even bigger, which of course reduces things a bit. So again, on the Nikon cameras, you just put the tubes on, you adjust your aperture to wherever you want it, and then you focus. But what I like to do is I like to focus at the closest distance, and then instead of trying to get things perfect, I actually will move my camera in and out. So if this was, I'm gonna go sideways now, if this was my object, it would be on a little platform, and I would be slowly moving in, and when I thought that I was in focus, I would take the shot. Some people, what they'll do, if they're in a more controlled setting, they'll use rails where they'll actually be able to really control things exactly. That's awesome. Or some people, what they'll do is they'll use multiple shots. So they'll kind of get into the right shot and they take multiple shots, and that way, if they're moving in and out slightly, which could happen, they hopefully will capture one in focus. I'm not steady enough to do that really very well. I'm actually better off just going in and getting the best shot that I can, and then shooting the image. So these are the manual tubes. Again, very easy, but look at your particular camera's manual, because for instance, some cameras, if they don't recognize an electrical connection, they think there's no lens there, and they won't operate. So you have to go in your menu setting and you have to adjust the camera so it will shoot a picture even if there's not a lens connected, or at least if it doesn't know that there's a lens connected. Other cameras, maybe if they have an electronic viewfinder, you might have to fill around. And I actually have a video on the Sonys, for instance, telling you what to set so that the electronic viewfinder works properly if you're not using strictly Sony equipment. So you'll have to check your manual. Again, on my Nikon D300S, I don't really have to do much of anything. All right, so you would think the perfect solution would be to go this route. This is more plasticky, but this has all the electrical connections and everything. Now, this particular model looks like it's being branded by a ton of different manufacturers. In other words, we call it like reboxed or rebagged, just kind of different people are calling the same thing. I found, however, that it was easier for me to use the manual tube. This one would only automatically work when I was at the smallest, I don't know, let's say how many millimeters it is here. When I was at the 12 millimeter only extension tube, if that was the only one that was on the camera would focus and meter and do everything automatically. As soon as I added any other addition to it, like the 20 millimeter or the 36 millimeter, or all three of them, it would just kind of, and nothing would happen. Now, it's possible this particular set of tubes is defective. These are about $50. They're not super high precision items, and if I had a lot of extra cash, I'd buy a couple sets of these and see if there was a comparison, but for me, it's not really worth the price. I think it's better to go with the very inexpensive tubes, and to make sure that you get a lens that you can manually control the aperture so you can fool around with that. Go in, take a lot of shots, expect that they all won't turn out, That's okay. That's the fun of doing it. And you can use flash rings or light rings or whatever things you'd like to do too. But this really lets you get into macro photography very, very easily, very simple. It's not complicated, but again, you want that little lens that has the aperture control ring on it, not at least in Nikon's, not the G series, or I'm sure Canon has an equivalent where it's all fly by wire. So with that, I'd say have a great day, and it's Sunday here in the beautiful state of Illinois, and the temperatures just dropped. It was really warm and absolutely beautiful yesterday, and now it's jacket weather. So we're in kind of fall. Some of you will be taking some fall pictures soon. If you get some time, please give my absolutely free podcast a listen. It's called Psychiatric Secrets Revealed with Dr. Mike. It's on iTunes and other podcatching sites. Please, please, please subscribe to my channel. It makes me want to make more videos, and that's it's kind of fun to make these videos anyways, but it encourages me, and hopefully you'll be getting something out of them too. And have a great day. By the way, I'm trying a new light. Normally I just use ambient light because this is the most simple setup possible, but I'm using this little newer LED video light, and I kind of like it. I don't know how long the batteries, it takes 6 AA batteries. I don't know how long they're going to last, but I'm using it with the amber filter right now, and I'm kind of sold on it. I might continue to use this. I actually bought it for a different project, but it's just sitting up on a little shelf shining on me, and it's so much better than me trying to use a piece of whiteboard or something to reflect on me properly. And I don't have to tilt my glasses so goofy so they're not like this, like I have them like this usually, so I don't get the reflection. It seems like with that light I get some reflection, but it's not so bad. Anyways, maybe we'll do a review on that. I guess I already did. Take care. Bye, everyone.